Hello, I'm Bart from the Data on Kubernetes community, and you are watching the Cloud Therapist channel.
Hello and welcome to Cloud Therapist Shorts. I'm Richard Simon. This talk is the start of a new series of short talks with the Data on Kubernetes community. Bart Farrell is the head of the Data on Kubernetes community and a CNCF ambassador. He's also generally a nice guy to know. So let's say hello to Bart and let's kick off. Hello, Bart. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks so much for the intro. Very good to be here.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you coming on to do this series of talks with us. In this one, we're going to be kind of covering a sort of an intro of the Data on Kubernetes community. And then in the next one, we're going to do a coverage of the survey report that you guys did towards the end of last year, which I think is really interesting in terms of the kind of the stats and the data that's come out of that. And hopefully for the third one, we're going to cover some a focus on kind of doing something in terms of a demo in this space of Kubernetes as well. So, Bart, let's just dive straight in. Can you give us a sort of a quick overview of the Data on Kubernetes community, please?
Yeah, happy to do so. So if people are familiar with the development, the origins of Kubernetes, they'll probably know that it wasn't designed with stateful workloads in mind, rather stateless workloads. And so it was after some years, the development, the arrival of stateful sets some years ago, and seeing that there were more practitioners who were interested in getting started with this, as it can provide a lot of value for their end users. But the difficulty was that there wasn't a community of practice where people could share strategies, resources, use cases, do's and don'ts about how to approach this. So in July of 2020, a few different companies got together, primarily Maya Data, DataStax, and Percona. And together they realized that, we can do this. There's enough interest from folks that are in the database management space, folks obviously from the storage side of things too, to get together and start this community with the intention of, like I said, a community of practice where engineers can come together and share and learn and help each other grow. So it started then in July of 2020. I got involved in the community in September of 2020 and have been the head of community since then. We've grown a lot. We've now done over 130 live streams. We're getting ready for our third KubeCon in May. We started when I arrived, we were about 120 in Slack, now over 2,600. Wow. Plenty of folks as well involved in LinkedIn and Twitter. As you mentioned, we had our research report that came out towards the end of last year. Yeah. Other things that have been going on. So the response has been very positive.
Fantastic. Excellent. And just to kind of clarify that, so it's not just kind of focusing on the data aspect of it, but also the storage aspect of it, and that kind of how that whole sort of technology really fits in with Kubernetes. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And there are different ways of looking at this. And we appreciate the fact that there are different sources of opinion. And we're also very much aware that prior to about last year, one of the driving forces behind why people were looking at things the way they looked at them was the fact of, Kelsey Hightower's presence in the space until last year, in June, where he tweeted because of the El Caro operator that Google had built to get, Oracle databases on Kubernetes, that the chasm had been crossed. And so that was very refreshing news for us. And once again, we still understand that there are different sources of opinions based on different use cases and different situations. But for us, the fact that more and more practitioners are open to this idea of stateful workloads on Kubernetes, be it database and storage, as well as other areas that we'll look more at when we talk about the results from the survey, that we're branching out now into things like AI, machine learning, analytics has an important role there to play too. So it is good to see that this ecosystem is increasingly developed and that people from different backgrounds can come together and extract value from it.
Excellent. Okay, yeah, and obviously, you've got really good backing as well. The likes of sort of Portworx also kind of giving you support in the community. So let's talk a little bit more about the why. And you kind of mentioned sort of some of the sort of compelling reasons for it, but just kind of dive a little bit more deep into that sort of idea, and also in terms of how the focus for the community and how they're actually sort of contributing to some of these challenges.
So yeah, the why, this is when we talk about any sort of thing that relates to, uncharted territory, right? So for a lot of people doing these things for the first time, it can be really overwhelming. And one of the reasons that perhaps might be, we've sort of identified 5 main reasons as to why practitioners would want to run stateful workloads on Kubernetes. And it's something we frequently ask our guests in our live streams. And one of the reasons is the simplicity of having everything all in one stack, that I don't have to have go to one place and to another. And then more, since Kubernetes has sort of won the container orchestration war, that the sort of push or tendency to get everything inside, under one common roof, that simplifies things. Another reason can be, and it also relates to that, is a factor of cost through simplification of everything all in the same place. Another issue that comes up as well too is leveraging the built-in features that Kubernetes already has. So, although it wasn't initially built with this in mind, of finding different ways to like I said, to make the most out of those existing features. Then security would be another factor. And then of course, talent, as it is for everybody, is a factor. As developers, administrators for Kubernetes are scarce. And so getting what the new sort of trend, building out from DBAs as a more traditional role into SREs or DBREs, database reliability engineers, seeing that as a growing area as well too. These are some of the things that we're building on. But obviously, as we're creating lots and lots of content, meaning like I said, over 130 live streams. So we've heard lots of different experiences from lots of different people from all over the world. And that's what really gives us the necessary fabric to feel more comfortable when approaching these challenges. And a very large concern for many of these organizations is the importance of standardizing practices. We know that it's still early days. It's still a very innovative space. But with every conversation that we have and with every new member of the community that comes in, our level of knowledge increases and we get one step closer to standardizing those practices so that it's not so overwhelming for people who want to get started out.
Excellent. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, as you said, I think earlier, that it's all kind of stemmed from, the ideal world that we kind of wanted, sort of stateless, sort of environments and workloads. And that's obviously, we kind of realized that we have to, drag the data center sort of along with us, or at least the applications, kind of refactor those and so on. And that has meant that certain things have fallen out of that, which yes, do require sort of, a more permanent sort of use of storage and somewhere for that for that data to be stored. So a little bit more about talk a little bit more about kind of how the DOK is kind of focusing on resolving some of these challenges. Kind of give me a little bit example of either from individuals or kind of vendors that are sort of looking at some of the real sort of enterprise challenges that organizations have, and how we're kind of looking to resolve those.
Great points. And with particularly what you touched on there about, generally speaking, the normal sort of thought when it comes to data is leave it alone, don't touch it. If we're like you said, we'll be dragging this, pulling it around with us everywhere we need to go. And in general, it's an area that we might say hasn't always been the most attractive or desirable area for folks to be in. But in 2022, we know that in many aspects of our lives, that data is extremely valuable. It's the most valuable resource that an organization can have. So it needs to be treated with the appropriate care. And when it comes to facilitating this process, making it easier, one of the things that we've seen time and time again in the community is, as the primary solution for several of the challenges with running stateful workloads on Kubernetes, are operators. And then that brings up other questions. Do I buy an operator? Do I build an operator? Do I have the necessary resources in-house to be working with it? Will my customers trust an operator that perhaps hasn't been so tested? Maybe it's only been around for a year. We have lots of, if you're in the financial sector, there are specific kind of regulations that apply to these kind of things. So these are some of the challenges that come up. And this is one of the things that we've seen, quite a bit. And we've seen different examples from folks that are working in telecommunications sector. We had a very interesting talk with the CTO from Cloudian, where he was talking about, and particularly going back to the challenge of storage. An autonomous car, I don't remember the exact amount of data that will be generated with the amount of sensors that are autonomous car, in every single microsecond is being tracked and generating huge amounts of data. what do you do with that? Where do you put that? How can you make sure that that's safe, and that it's being well looked after, and that it can be treated in the way that needs to be treated? So these are some of the things that come up, and like I said, because a lot of these things are being done sometimes for the first time, that excitement and spark of let's see how these things can go, and sometimes things don't work out, and very often the conversations that really seem to drive things forward is when engineers will come forward and say, I tried this and it was a complete disaster, so don't make the same mistake. And I find that that element of risk to be something that encourages a lot of people. But then also, like I said, seeing these cases where it is going very well is comforting both for end users and obviously vendors.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think the that kind of, again, just looking at storage and data, now that we've realized that we actually do need some persistence of that, it's kind of trying to really make that as efficient and as close to the processing that Kubernetes clusters are sort of doing as possible, really. And obviously that makes sense to try and bring that in. So in terms of the folks sort of that want to kind of get involved in the community, how can they do that?
Good. So we have different ways for people to get involved. We have obviously our weekly live streams, and we generally do around 2 per week, sometimes more. We're also doing panels about different topics. So if anyone is interested or like to take that further, we're very easy to contact. We'll obviously leave all the information in the description for Slack, etc. We also realize that in order to have better engagement with our community members and help them become a bigger part of the story that we're telling, we decided about 6 months ago to play around with the idea of creating some kind of a sandbox environment where folks can get hands-on experience with the technologies we're talking about. And it came down to the fact that one of our different unique characteristics that help us have a different identity as a community is that we love art and music. And it's something that was very clear from the very beginning that it's something we needed to do, because once again, let's face it, data management, infrastructure, and we're talking about storage, things of that nature, aren't necessarily the things that people go home and tell their friends and family about every day, depending on what kind of friends and family you have. But so one of the things that we started doing from the very beginning is that I write a rap as a dedication to all the speakers that we have. So we have these videos on YouTube, etc.
I have seen those. I've seen the posts. Yeah,
you've been a witness.
Yes.
So one of our community members, Tim Vandekere, he was like, "Hey, why don't we put the lyrics from the rap videos onto a database, and then we can run that database on Kubernetes?" And so that's the sort of first small project that we've been working on with some wonderful folks from all over the world who've been contributing. So for people who want to have technical contributions, they can get in there. Also, non-technical contributions are also always welcome, and we're open to ideas. And so starting with this project, we want to start building other ones to be able to play around with. I mean, there are lots of different databases, there are lots of different operators, and we want people to get as much direct experience as they can with those things. So like I said, in general, jump in Slack, find me, and we'll help you get you sorted out. Fantastic.
Well, Bob, thank you very much for doing this talk. It's been really interesting kind of doing this first intro to the data and Kubernetes community. No doubt we'll pick up more details in this sort of part 2 and part 3 and kind of do a little bit more on that. Yeah, all the details on the community, web links and how to join the Slack channels and things like that will be in the description of the video. So yeah, it only leaves me to thank you again, and I'll talk to you on the next one.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much for watching this talk. Please subscribe to support the channel, and we'll see you next time.